Hello class, and welcome to Professor Choi's economics class. So in this particular chapter, we give you the foundations and the beginnings of what exactly do you study when you study economics. So what exactly is economics? I remember when I decided that I was going to study economics, it was a little difficult to explain to my family what exactly I was studying. Because most people, when they think of economics, they think of basically somebody being cheap or economical, or they think about efficiency. And an economist is, in fact, a person that can be cheap at times because it's a person that tries to maximize resources. So, economics is basically the study of choices and how people make those choices to attain their goals, given the fact that there's a scarcity of resources. So all the resources that we have are scarce. We don't have enough time in the day to do all the things that we want to do. We don't have enough years in the calendar to live all the time that we want to live. We don't have enough working hours in the day to get through all the stuff you need to do at work. So you need to pick what you're going to be doing and what you're not going to be doing. An economic model is an oversimplified version of reality that tries to explain how people make those decisions. So the way you study economics is usually through the understanding of economic models. All right, now before we get to that, let's just talk about what exactly is scarcity. So scarcity is a situation in which you have unlimited wants that exceed the limited resources available for you to fulfill those wants. So people always want more of whatever it is. So if you already have a house, you want a bigger one. If you already have a pen, you want a better one. If you already have a phone, you want a faster one. If you already have a car, you want a more expensive one, or just a different one. So people's needs are basically unlimited. But the resources that we have are very much limited. So an economist is basically a person that helps you go from point A to point B and helps you try to figure out what's the best way to get there. So the best way to think about an economist is basically a person that thinks about how to go from point A to point B the best way possible. So we are maximizers. We try to figure out the best way to do things. All right, now we organize a lot of things into markets because we think markets can serve a lot of these purposes, like trying to figure out what the right price for a product is. So we'll talk a lot about markets and groups of people. All right, now let's talk about some basic economic ideas. Now, these are three assumptions that we make in economics that if they're not true, basically economics doesn't work. I will try to defend them here so you understand that what we're trying to explain is basically true, but sometimes it is difficult to understand them, at least at the beginning. So we like to think that people are rational. Now, when we say rational, we don't mean that people are not crazy per se. What we mean is that we assume that people are always looking to maximize whatever resources they have to get the highest utility possible. And utility is a word that we use in economics for pleasure or satisfaction. So the idea is that everyone is trying to get the best bang for their buck all the time. And that's what we call rational. We like to assume that people respond to economic incentives. So given the fact that you have a particular economic incentive, you will behave accordingly, and we can therefore model that behavior because we have kind of studied, say, similar behaviors in the past. We also like to assume that people make decisions on the margin. The marginal decisions basically mean that you make decisions on a hour by hour, minute by minute, step by step basis. You don't make a decision of all or nothing. Now, to illustrate what I mean, let's think about a simple thing. So let's say that I'm standing over here and I want to get to the door in the classroom. All right, so I've learned from before that basically the best way to go is just a straight line. So my initial thought is I'll just walk on a straight line. All right, so imagine that I start walking on a straight line. And then now all of a sudden, boom, a tile falls off the ceiling and it's about to hit my head. Now, if I see that tile coming down, do you think I'm just going to stay in the same path? Of course not. I'm going to go around that tile and then back to the straight line on the door, to the door. All right, now this right here describes basically the way economists think in many ways. So you start with the rational thought. You go, okay, well, I want to get to the door. Quickest way possible is a straight line. Then I'm walking towards the door, and then all of a sudden here comes an economic incentive. The economic incentive is that tile falling right off the roof. Because of the tile, I know that it hurts, so I go around the tile and I miss it. And then I still want to go to the door, so I keep going towards the door. So notice that again, I make my decision step by step. So I didn't just assume, all right, this is the best way to go, let's just keep going, forget the tile. No, you went around and you said, okay, well, tiles hurt, so let me go around the tile. And I still want to get to the door. So the way we think about this kind of stuff is basically that economic incentives can be introduced at any point in time, and then people will take a particular path because of that economic incentive, and we can model it. And that's the idea. All right, so again, with those three basic decisions, we like to kind of conduct pretty much a lot of economic thinking. So let's talk about the first kind of basic economic model, which we call the marginal benefit, marginal cost analysis. All right, now again, for starters, the first thing we need to remember is that the word marginal for us means the extra unit. So marginal means the additional unit. So therefore, marginal benefit is the additional benefit, while marginal cost is the additional cost. All right, so let's think about a basic marginal benefit, marginal cost analysis. Most economic models are graphical, and so is the marginal benefit, marginal cost analysis. So we're going to put on this side, we're going to put on the horizontal axis, we're going to put quantity. And by the way, we like to use these letters. So we're going to be using letter Q always for quantity. And then on this side, we're going to put price, or in this case, cost, or it could be marginal benefit or marginal cost. And we're going to measure that, I guess you could say, in dollars or utility. All right, so imagine that you're going to buy beer. And imagine that each beer that you grab, so each beer bottle, is going to cost you $4. Now let's say, for now, there are no other costs. All right? So how would we graph something that's always going to cost you $4 and nothing else? Well, we would say that at unit 1, so if I were to grab the first beer, then it's going to cost me $4. Now, if I were to grab the second beer, because we're measuring marginal benefit here, then it will still cost me $4. Because, again, the only cost right now is the cost of the bottle, which is 4. There are no other costs right now. So if I were to grab a third beer, then my marginal cost will still be at 4. Because there are no other costs, just the cost of the bottle, then I can say that my marginal cost is basically a straight line at 4. All right? And this becomes my marginal cost line at $4. All right, now let's think about how do you end up consuming something. So why do we consume something? Oh, took that line away, get it back. All right, now the reason we consume something is because the benefit it gives us is higher than the cost at the moment of consumption. So we can make the assumption that if I'm consuming a beer, it's because, say, I'm thirsty or I want to drink it. So if I consume the first beer, it's because on the first beer, the benefit of it is higher than the cost of it. So let's say benefit starts at, say, 7. All right, now we can also assume that at some point you're going to stop drinking beer. And you're going to stop drinking beer because you run out of money, or because you don't want to drink anymore, because you got drunk. So basically there is a point where the benefit of the beer is not greater than the cost of the beer. So I can come down here and put a point there and say, well, somewhere in the future, the benefit of the beer is no longer going to be higher than the cost of the beer. The benefit will be lower. So that is my basic shape for marginal benefit. It starts high and it goes down. All right, so the purpose of understanding marginal benefit, marginal cost is to talk about this point there where the two lines meet, which we're going to call right now equilibrium. All right, now why is this equilibrium? Well, the reason it's equilibrium is because it's the point where the sort of argument of consuming ends, and that's how many we're going to consume. So let's think about this. I'm going to consume the first beer because the benefit of it is greater than the cost. And then I'm going to keep consuming. I'm going to consume the second one because the benefit of it is greater than the cost. And then I'm going to keep consuming. Then I'm going to get to the third one and the argument is over. Now imagine that I pass and I go to, say, 4. Now 4, the cost of it is going to be greater than the benefit. So 4 gave me more cost than it gave me in benefit, and I'm going to remember that. So I'm going to move back the next time that this happens to me. Now, the way you get to equilibrium in this particular marginal benefit, marginal cost analysis is by kind of like randomly bumping into your equilibrium. Like the way most people figure out how to drink beer. They basically drink until they get drunk, or they drink until they run out of money. And that's basically when you stop. All right, so this 3 is our equilibrium. Equilibrium is usually denoted with either an asterisk or an E, depending on the book. So some have an asterisk, some have an E, or some have something else. All right, now notice that there is a range of quantities all the way from 0 to infinity. So there are, all of these are different quantities, but equilibrium is a quantity where the two lines meet, or the most important quantity, or the one where you naturally arrive to. So basically, in this particular marginal benefit, marginal cost analysis, we're going to consume 3 beers. All right, now notice also the change in equilibrium. Imagine now that I decide that the price of beer goes up to 5. So if I increase the price of beer to 5, so let's say price goes up to $5, then what happens is the marginal cost of beer is no longer 4. Now the marginal cost of beer becomes 5. And because the marginal cost of beer is at 5, then look at what's going to happen to the total consumption of beer. Notice that equilibrium is going to move from this point to this point. Let's call it equilibrium 2. And then now I am not going to consume as much beer as before. As a matter of fact, I am now only going to consume 2 beers by the same kind of thought process we did before. So equilibrium is a moving target, and it's a target that we can move by making changes in marginal cost and marginal benefit. So an increase in cost makes the quantity of equilibrium decline, while a decrease in cost makes the quantity of equilibrium increase. Notice that if I lower the cost of beer to say $2, then equilibrium changes and I will consume more beer. Okay? All right. So again, the purpose of a marginal benefit, marginal cost is to help you understand that equilibrium is something that can be arrived at naturally. All right. By the same token, by the way, we can change marginal cost to the right or marginal cost to the left, and then equilibrium will keep moving. So this equilibrium point is not a steady state place. All right. All right. Now let's add a really important cost to any economic transaction, something we call opportunity cost. So opportunity cost is basically the idea that every time you do something, there is a trade-off. The trade-off is the cost of pretty much everything. So if you decide to say, go swim for an hour, then the cost of swimming for an hour is all the other things that you could have been doing instead of swimming. You could have been running for an hour, that's a cost, therefore. You could have been working for an hour, so it costs you at least 8 something, whatever the minimum wage is. Okay? So a trade-off is the idea that whatever you do is going to cost you something. The least is going to cost you is time. Opportunity cost is the thing that you value the most out of all the things that you were thinking about to doing at that point in time. So opportunity cost is the highest valued alternative that you have to give up in order to engage in any activity. So right now, for example, if you're sitting listening to my video, then alternatively from listening to my video, you could have been working. So technically, listening to my video is not just going to cost you the cost of tuition or something like that. It's also going to cost you, say, an hour of work or an hour of watching the Jerry Springer Show, if you like watching the Jerry Springer Show, or an hour of sleeping if you wanted to sleep instead. Opportunity cost is a cost that you need to add to pretty much everything. All right, now let's think about the same marginal benefit, marginal cost analysis with an opportunity cost. All right, now if I add an opportunity cost to my $3 original, was it 3? No, it's 4. Okay, my original cost of beer, $4. All right, if I add an opportunity cost to that, then I would say something like, all right, this $4 you could have spent on, say, a burger instead. So because you didn't purchase that burger, okay, because you didn't purchase that burger, you missed that. All right, now if you decide to buy another beer, then now you're also missing something else that you could have gotten instead. And if you decide to buy another one, then again, you're missing something else. So there's always something on top of 4 that you're going to be missing. Not to mention, you could have gotten all of these 4s, put it together, and buy something for 12. All right, so marginal benefit, it's not a flat line. It's usually upward sloping. It's the cost of the item plus the cost of all the alternative items you could have gotten as well. And marginal benefit is downward sloping. So a marginal benefit, marginal cost graph looks like that. Now, the way you arrive at equilibrium, by the way, is exactly the same way we arrived at equilibrium before. So, as long as the benefit is higher than the cost, we keep consuming whatever the item is. So this Q here represents equilibrium. This point here represents my point where marginal benefit, marginal cost equal. Good so far? All right. Now with that in mind, think about societies and how societies have to answer questions. You have three fundamental questions. What goods and services are going to be produced? How would those goods and services be produced? And who is going to receive those goods and services? Now, some books, by the way, have like 5 different questions, basic questions. Some books have 3 basic questions like this one. It doesn't quite matter. The point here is that there are a set of basic questions that every society has to figure out how to answer. So, how do we answer these fundamental questions? Creates a different society. There are 2 basic competing economic models in the world today. We call one economic model the market economy, and we call the other economic model the centrally planned economy or command economy. In a market economy, the majority of decisions are made by households and companies interacting with each other through markets. That's how we allocate economic resources. In a pure market economy, there will be no government. Now, as we know, we have a government, and the government can be very active or very inactive at times. So we don't really have a sort of pure market economy. In a centrally planned economy, think the decisions of the market and the decisions of how to allocate economic resources are being made by a central government. These are usually what we call a single party system, or economies where basically you have only one party, one group of people, or one person managing the majority of the resources. So in a centrally planned economy, most resources and property are owned by the government or whoever the government is. There is very little private property, if anything, and used as what we call centrally planned to allocate goods and services. Examples are places like Cuba, the old Soviet Union, or North Korea. Now, most economies in the world are really mixed economies. A mixed economy is an economy in which most decisions result from the interaction between buyers and sellers in the market, but the government plays a very significant and heavy role in the allocation of resources. Now, to understand what do we mean by mixed economies, I want you to think about the size of the government. So, let's put at the top an example of a really open economy. So this would be like the maximum sort of market economy. And over here, let's put sort of the maximum centrally planned. All right, so 100% market does not exist. Everyone has a government. The US, it's about 80% there. So let's say at around 80%, you got the United States. Now in the United States, if you look at the total GDP, gross domestic product, which is a metric for the size of an economy, the US government during normal times is around 20% or so of the US economy. So basically, 80% of decisions or so are made through market forces. All right, now if you go to countries like in the European Union, for example, in the European Union, they have a slew of different countries, and all of them are not equal. Some of them are around where the level of the US is, so let's call it 80% market. But then you have countries like Greece, for example, that have a heck of a lot more centrally planned behavior, and they're about, let's say, 60%, because the government's about 40% of the economy. All right? Then you have places like China, for example. In China, a lot of things are government mandated. and they're about 50% of the way because there's also a lot of market-driven stuff in China. Then we start heading towards centrally planned, and then we have examples like Cuba. Now, the last estimate I heard about Cuba, the government controls about 90% of the economy. So that basically means that about 10% of economic activity in Cuba is what they call over there in the island cuentapropistas. So these are small businesses, cuentapropistas, there you go. So these are small businesses that do different things, but the government is about 90% of the economy. And then North Korea, it's sort of like the ultimate of centrally planned. And it's only about 1% market or so. Let's use the market as talking about illegal activities, for example. So there's got to be something illegal going on. All right. So if you look at the way the world really is distributed, you don't have anybody who's 100% market, just like you don't have anybody who's 100% centrally planned. It's really more like a spectrum. And most economies today are mixed economies with more centrally planned versus more market. One of the things, by the way, that we definitely don't want to do is we don't want to equate market systems with political systems. So you don't need to have a democracy to have a market economy, just like you don't need to have socialism to have a centrally planned economy. All right? And you might want to study a little bit more on that, by the way, if you do have the belief that market equals democracy and centrally planned equals socialism. All right? This is not how it works. Most people kind of have this line mentality where basically if you're politically left and politically right, then you have this sort of basic set of ideas. But when you start talking to them, that's not how it works at all. So this is more like a spider sort of thing than it is a right and left. All right? But anyway, since we're talking about economics, not politics, then think about market versus centrally planned. And you don't need to have, by the way, again, a democracy to be up here or a communistic society to be down here. All right. Now, why is it that markets seem to work better if you look at history? And I was talking to someone the other day, what I was explaining to them is that it's not like the market economy is the best system. It's that the market economy is the best system so far. In other words, we have tried lots of other systems and they don't seem to function very well. They tend to collapse. So the market economy is yet to collapse. Therefore, it is the best system. But it is not because it is the best system. Okay? It's kind of like if you think about utopia, then a utopian system will be better. But if you look at reality, then it is the best we got so far until we change. Now, there are a couple of reasons why this is true. Productive and allocative efficiency are the most basic reasons. Now, in a market system, a good or service is produced at the lowest cost possible. And the reason for that is because there is a profit motive every time somebody creates a business and wants to sell you something. And in order for you to make a profit, you got to have low cost. So if you think about what exactly is profit, and back to that beer example. So if I'm selling you beer at $4, and those $4 have to cover the cost of the beer, so the true cost of the beer to me, but it also has to cover money that I want to make in order to stay in business. So in other words, the cost of the beer, let's say the cost of the beer is $3, and I want to make $1, then I'll charge you $4 for beer. All right, now profit is the number here, this one right here. This is profit. Now a market system is a profit maximizing system. So we want profit to be as high as possible. There are two ways to do that. One is to raise prices, but because of competition, you might not be able to do that because when you raise prices, somebody else might sell it for something cheaper. Another way is to cut costs. Okay, so notice that in order to increase profit, there are two basic ways to do it. One is to be able to increase prices, and the other one is to be able to cut costs, and that makes profit go higher. So we have productive efficiency in the market system because everybody's trying to produce at the lowest cost possible. Everybody's trying to maximize the resources so they make the most profit possible. We also have allocative efficiency. The market produces whatever people want in a very basic way. So every time you spend $1 on anyone's business, what you're basically doing is you're voting for that business to continue. So if tomorrow you decide, all right, I'm going to go and cancel my Netflix subscription and I'm going to get Disney Plus with that, then what you just did is you took your, say, $10 a month and you switch from this one to this one. And if a lot of people do that, Netflix will go bankrupt, Disney Plus will make a lot of money. All right? I'm not suggesting, by the way, that you do this, but think about the choice before. So if you go back to, say, the year 2014, we had a company called Blockbuster that was around. And Blockbuster was something that people went out of to go to Netflix. And they went bankrupt. So every time you spend money on anything, what you're basically doing is you're voting, it's like a vote. You're voting for that business to do what they do and to continue to do it. And businesses come and go because of that vote that you put on them. All right, so you get what we call allocative efficiency. The market does what society wants. You also have voluntary exchanges. In a centrally planned economy, if you live there, and I'm from Cuba, you always feel like somebody's telling you what to do. They tell you how to dress to go to school. They tell you what furniture you have, what shoes you're allowed to buy, what clothes you're allowed to wear, etc., etc. So they're always being dictated stuff. And people in that particular system feel like they don't have any say. In a market system, you feel like everything is voluntary. So the phone that you have is the one you wanted, the clothing that you wear, the one you wanted, the car that you bought is the one you wanted, or at some point you'll be able to get the one you wanted. Now, one of the things the system is not, especially a market system, is equity, equality. The market system does not have equality. As a matter of fact, the market system can create a lot of inequality. Now, inequality in many ways is built into the system. So I think of the market system as a sort of ladder. And you're always trying to move up the ladder. Now, just let's think about it just in terms of you being good at something and then you being great at something. Okay? So if you're the best basketball player, then the idea is that the best means you'll make the most money. And by the way, I'm not talking about the best is actually the one with the most money, but I'm trying to help you understand that being the great comes with some assumptions or benefits. One of them has to do with money. If you're okay at it, you'll make some money. And then if you're just good at it, I don't know, good at a pickup game or something, then maybe you'll make some money or maybe you gotta play for free. But the idea is that as you move up the ladder, there is a money benefit to it. All right, if you think about education, for example, another way of kind of looking at this, if you finish your associate degree, then you're expected to basically make more money than people who only graduated from high school. Now, this may or may not be true, but the expectation is there. If you finish your bachelor's degree, then now you're expected to make even more money because you're at a higher level than all these other people. If you go and get a master's degree, then now again the expectation is that you're going to be making more. Again, more could be more recognition, more money, more something, but the idea is that there's going to be more. And then if you get your PhD or you become, the boss of something, then the expectation is that there's going to be even more. All right? So there is an assumption of more. There is an assumption of more. And there is an assumption that those things are always going to be there. In other words, if you put more effort, if you do more, etc., then you get more. That is the essence of inequality. It is not the assumption that we're all going to share everything after that. It is the assumption that inequality is in the system, it's built into the system, and that's how the system works. All right. How do we develop economic models? Well, an economic model is devised using the scientific process. So we look for things to test, we formulate hypotheses to test it, then we look for data to test our hypothesis, then we revise the model if it fails to explain the data, and we retain the model if it happens to be correct for the future. There are two basic ways to analyze economics. One's what we call positive analysis, the other one's what we call normative analysis. A positive analysis is concerned with what is. So you get the data, you tell people the data, that's pretty much it. Normative analysis is concerned with what ought to be. So normative analysis, when you take that data and then you make some kind of value judgment about it. Now the value judgment may be about the future or what's best for you or what's not best for you, but it's a second sort of way of analyzing economics. So one is just to tell people the data, tell them what you saw, and then normative analysis is to make a value judgment after that. Microeconomics is the study of smaller units, households, companies, smaller units, people, individuals. Macroeconomics is the study of the big picture. So macroeconomics is the study of the aggregate level. So it's kind of like if you kind of go up and look at it from the top, your macroeconomics class, you're going to be studying about cities and counties and governments and big picture stuff, you know, how governments function, how systems function. In microeconomics, you look at the behavior of smaller individuals. You look at the behavior of people, like how each individual behaves, or the behavior of companies, so how a particular company behaves, or how does the government decide on a government contract. Now, the next three slides, by the way, are a list of important terms that we normally assume once you get past this chapter, you're going to remember, because in subsequent chapters, you sort of use these terms regularly. An entrepreneur is somebody who operates a business. Innovation is an improvement on a particular thing that's already in existence, which is not to be confused with the technological advance. Now, technology in economics is when something major changes. So when a process is changed to something different. An example of a technological advance is the internet. So the internet revolutionized the way we talk to each other, the way we provide classes, like with this video, the way people interact with each other. Another thing that could be a technological advance is, say, the invention of roads. Before roads, we didn't have paths. Before roads, things were slower. I want you to think about the invention of something like the shipping container. Like a box. So things that make us change the way we look at lots of other stuff. Another thing that could be a technological advance is something like when we invented the assembly line. All right. Assembly line was invented by Henry Ford, and it revolutionized the way you and I produce things today. I mean, restaurants have an assembly line in the back. If you go to McDonald's, there's an assembly line there. So it revolutionized the way we produce things, and it has created consumerism today. All right. Goods are things that you can touch. Services are things that other people do on your behalf. So a good is something that we produce that you can, I don't know, like a board or a PC or a mouse or a wireless keyboard. A service is something that somebody performs on your behalf. All right. Now, in this particular slide, we talk about the difference between like what is revenue and what is profit and what is cost. And we sort of explained this already before. But basically, revenue is the same as sales, and cost is whatever it costs you to produce the product that you're selling. The difference between revenue and cost is profit. Companies are profit maximizers, which means that they try to increase their revenue as much as they can and cut costs as much as they can. Households is the way we measure most things. Household is again the size of people occupying a house. So most things in macroeconomics specifically are usually built for the household. In order to oversimplify things, we like to talk about stuff like the factors of production. Now, there are four basic factors of production in economics. And the factors of production are the things that you have to buy in order to produce things. So the four factors are land, labor, capital, and entrepreneurship. Land refers to anything associated with land, which is basically most of the time natural resources. Labor is the people who work in those in firms in order to produce products. Capital is the financial or physical capital, like the machines, the stocks, the bonds, the money, or the things that you have to buy in order to produce whatever you gotta produce. The capital is the stuff that you use over and over and over, like the tools in your toolbox. Human capital, by the way, is accumulated skills. So this is when somebody has a lot of different accumulated knowledge and makes it more efficient. Land, again, is raw materials. Labor is the people. Capital is the things that you use over and over and over. And entrepreneurship is that thing that some people have that can start a business. So an entrepreneur is somebody who has the ability to start a business. All right, that concludes our introduction to economics chapter. Thank you very much. This is Professor Choi. See you around.